Welcome to Vermont Artists and Authors, where we interview great storytellers and artists from the amazing Green Mountain State. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're honored to have with us the internationally revered certified health and life coach and writer, Monica Morrissey. Monica,
Hello.
how are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me.
I was on your podcast a few months ago,
Yep.
and which was interesting because I was trying to get you on my podcast before I was on your podcast, and now finally you're here. This is great. I'm excited about this. First, when we were first talking to have you come on, you had a book out called Dimes from Heaven,
Yep.
and now you're on. You actually now have 3 books out. You have Dimes from Heaven. Your second book was called More Dimes from Heaven, and then your third book is Once Upon a Dime. Heaven is talking to us. How do you know how to listen? Do you know how to listen? So,
And
wow.
I also have 2 journals and a card deck.
Oh my
I don't know
goodness.
if you see
Wow.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a grief journal with prompts to help people who are dealing with grief. And then I have a card deck that's called Heaven's Messages, so that you could draw a card and get a message from heaven.
This wasn't your career as a writer. This is fairly recent, as in the last under a decade. You wrote your first book, correct?
Yeah, I was actually really sick, and somebody said writing might be a therapeutic. And so I lost both of my parents within 8 months of each other. And it's a very stressful time in my life. And I was stressed at work. I just constantly, and it wore me down. And I was very ill, and the doctors couldn't figure out what was going on with me. And somebody said, "Hey, writing is therapeutic." And I rolled my eyes and said, "This isn't going to cure me. Like, I need a pill to fix me." Like, I just didn't know. And I thought I was writing a 10-page paper that was going to be like, I could give it to my kids and my grandkids and say, "Hey, this is a cool dime story. This is what happened to me after, my dad died." And lo and behold, literally like 9 months later, out popped this book, just like a baby.
Wow.
I was like, wow, I did not see that coming. And it's interesting. In the first chapter, I start writing and I'm just furiously writing. And we were on vacation in Florida with my husband. And my husband kind of comes into the story, and this is in the book. He comes into the story and he says, as I'm writing, "Are you writing a book?" I was like, "I don't know." Like, maybe I am. And that was the beginning of my writing journey.
How many pages is this first book then?
The first draft is not what you see here. It was definitely like a clay, right? Molding it
Mm-hmm.
and changing it. But that first, draft was, all about, this weird dime story after my dad passed away. And I didn't see it coming. I actually hated to write. I was a teacher for a lot of years, and I liked math. I liked math a lot more. So I don't know. It came really from my soul, from my gut. And if you read it, you'll know. Like, you'll hear me talk and question myself. And I was very worried too that, I was a public school teacher and I was writing a spiritual book, and the fear was right in this book. Like, you can tell, like, I worry so much about what other people thought. And so this was a very difficult thing for me to do, to put myself out there. But I also really felt inspired that, even when I told a few people about my dime story, it really affected them and they
Mm.
saw the power in it. And so I really felt compelled to share my story. And while I was writing, all of these, like, the universe, like, I feel helped support me during this time. And they gave me a lot of resources about being an empath and understanding my sensitivity. And again, I felt like, boy, this could help other people. And it could also help people understand their kids, because my parents didn't
Mm.
understand how sensitive I was. And so this gave the tools. I'm a teacher at heart, right? So it's not just about the dime story, it's about teaching, everything that I've learned, and also about being sensitive, a sensitive person, and what that means for me. And I give you the tools that I learned in this.
Mm. You're able to self-publish these books, correct?
So yeah, at first I did do like a hybrid publisher at first, but it didn't really work out.
Mm.
I don't know. I really spent too much money, to be quite honest, and
Right.
I pulled it back from them, and I self-published all of everything that I've done. Um, and I think that there's power in that because I had more of a say in my books. And
Right.
I've talked to other authors that like, oh, my publisher wanted this cover instead of that cover, and I don't know. I just really felt empowered that, this was my voice and nobody was going to change it to make sure that it fit what their rules are.
How did you adjust the story? Because as you say, because now this has book one, so you kind of like this is a revisited first book, correct?
Yes, this is the second edition. The first edition, I do still have copies of that. That one was in color and that one was a square because I wanted the pictures to be in color because I hate
Mm.
black and white pictures in a book. And so that's why I spent a little bit more money. So that's kind of my baby. I still have probably, I don't know, probably 40 or 50 copies of that one left that are kind of in storage. And I have those if people want them. But it was also a very expensive book. And so this one got the expense down too. I think this one might be $10 or something now. Whereas the other one, when it first came out, was $32. And so
Wow.
that's, something to look at, when you're an author is that price point.
So talk to us a little bit about the piece of like how the second edition is slightly changed. Did you have to like, was there anything that you felt as though as the author, but also kind of as the editor itself is, I can't put this in, I'm going to put this in another book, but were there some things that you just felt like you had to remove because it just didn't fit the pace of the book?
So yeah, so originally my second book was actually part of my first book
Okay.
because I kept track of all the crazy stuff that happened while I was writing. I mean, I can't even tell you. I go to get my business cards printed, and where we live, I have to travel at least 30 minutes to get to anywhere from where I live. And I researched like all these different places I could have my business cards. And I'm like, you know what? My husband works in Stowe, so I'm gonna pick this local business over there and I'm gonna have him print it. And I go in to pick them up and they say to me, "Did you write a book?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Is it about dimes?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "This is so weird. We have a dime glued to the floor over here." I'm like, "The one place that I pick, there's a dime glued to the floor. Like, I can't make that stuff up." And all these weird things started happening. So I had kept track, like May 17th, this happened, all these different things. And I felt like it was like the universe unfolding and supporting me during this writing journey because, there were many times when I just wanted to give up. Like the fear was just too much. And so all of those things ended up in that third book or the second book. And also a twist of like how to self publish so that other
Mm.
people can have a voice because I'm sure you're aware of it's hard to get a book agent, right? It's hard to get through those doors of, the big publishers. And I was like, why do we all have to do this? Why do we have to run by their rules? Why can't we all have a voice? Why can't, and my book will do what it's going to do. It will help the people that it's supposed to help. I really believe in that. And so anyway, that was the second book. So if anybody is interested in, learning how to self-publish, first I share my story, but I also share things about how to write, right?
Mm.
Because there's important things that we don't understand about our subconscious and how when you put pen to paper and with your hand, and you start writing, more comes out that you aren't aware of in your, like, I call it your regular brain. It's only 10% really of what we're running on. We're really running on 90% subconscious. So there's some things in there that help you understand writing at a different level. The other thing too, I think it's Deepak Chopra is mentioned in this book, where he talks about, oh, now I'm like that aha moment. I was
Mm.
very concerned in my first book. I struggled with my relationship with my mother, and I did not want to, I don't know, I didn't want to talk bad about her, especially because she's not even here anymore. And that really bothered me. And so I had this aha, and that's when I discovered that I was an empath and I was super sensitive. And maybe it wasn't about her, maybe it was more about me just being super sensitive. And
Mm.
so that aha moment, we talk about that where you have to step away from your writing to get clarity.
Right.
And you can't be so focused on getting it done, getting it out there. You have to, step away. I thought that I was stepping away from my writing because, like, I was getting nervous or I was getting too scared or something. But it was in that quiet moments that the answers came to me.
Well, hey there. If you're enjoying our podcast, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep this show going. We love hearing from you, so any feedback is welcome. Thank you for being a part of our podcast family and for all your support. It truly means a lot to us. How has your writing evolved from your second book from your first book?
My second book was, I don't know, it was short and sweet, but it was different. I would say my writing has evolved even more with my third book,
Okay.
um, and using stories to teach. Um, there's this one, no, I don't want to give that away. I was thinking of a story that's in this book, but I don't want to give it away because it's part of the ending. Anyway, I won't give the whole story, but there's a toothpick story in my second book, and it just really resonated with people. And they were like, oh, that toothpick story. It had a purpose. It had, they really grasped it. And so, like, this book is a bunch of stories. That's why it's called Once Upon a Dime, right? And that title is you find out how that title appeared magically to me in the book, because I wasn't necessarily my idea. Spirit really helped me. And it's just a kind of a crazy story of how that came to be. Um, but again, this is using stories to teach different things. Um, yeah, and I mean, I just feel really blessed that the people that, either were aware of my first two books or knew me personally, and they started sharing these stories with me. And these stories are the this book of, like, listening to people share their stories about, their connection with their loved ones, or
Mm.
my intuition just kind of saying, boy, I think I should tell this person about my books, but I don't want to be like a braggy author, right? Like, I don't want to be that person, but I just kept getting this feeling like I'm supposed to tell this person about my book. And lo and behold, finally he asked me what I do for a living, and I'm like, well, like, this is what I'm doing. And then I'm also a writer. And he was just like, bingo. His eye, like, he perked right up. He's like, what do you write about? And I was like, okay, now I can tell him, right? Like, I don't have to be the person to bring it up. Anyway, I started telling about, dimes are my sign for my dad and stuff. And the guy, he looked back at me and he said, well, my son died, and he shows me threes all the time. And I was just like, oh my God, I've been seeing
Wow.
threes all week before I met this gentleman. So anyway, we end up having this deep conversation about this. And it's just fascinating to me when you start sharing these stories and what people are going through. It just is amazing. So a lot of times after my first two books, people were like excited. They were like happy for me. And I got several comments of people coming up to me and saying, I'm glad you get dimes, Monica. I am so happy for you. And how do I get a sign? I miss my people. How do I
Mm.
do? And I was like, oh, that's the next book. So I had some of these stories that are in this book had been from my original blog that I had shared. So I had been blogging and, writing down some of these incredible stories. And so I took those and put them into a book.
Wow. Okay, because that was going to be my question was, what advice would you give someone who is skeptical about receiving signs from loved ones who have passed?
Yeah. I mean, I was never a believer. I read about it, but I was like, yeah, I don't know. Butterfly. I see butterflies everywhere. You know, um, it's not until it happens to you that you're going to really believe. But in this book, I give you the directions and I'll share them here. I'm very open about it because I want to help people. But I also
Mm.
want you to be curious and go read more to learn more. But one of the things is to ask for a specific sign. Dimes were mine because my dad had given me this dime necklace. And 2 weeks after he died, I found my first dime that was just incredible. So you have to have something that connects you to that person. And you don't have to tell anybody, but then you just start observing. You start observing where you are. You start watching on Facebook, and you just keep it tucked away in your head, or you can write it down, whatever that you want to do, and then just see if it appears, and see
Okay.
if there's a coincidence that happens.
Out of your three books, what message or feeling do you hope readers take away from your books, and um, how do you hope it impacts their lives?
So I think a lot of people are dealing with grief, and for
Mm.
me, grief is really about love, and it has no place to go, right? Because they aren't here, so you can't love them anymore. And so my hope is that you'll feel a little closer to your loved ones and that you'll remember their legacy from what I want my clients to borrow their love and really feel their love in their hearts. Also, in my third book, I talk a lot about it, is that the 5 stages of grief were not meant for someone who's grieving. And you go to grief counselors and you could stay in a grief counseling forever. But honestly, it's about keeping that connection alive. But Kubler-Ross made those for someone who is facing their own death. And
Mm.
so knowledge is power. And so understanding that there are other stages that you could use to help you during your grief. And also just to know that there is this other way to live, and that one of the things is that those people are still really here with us. We just can't see them. And they can
Mm.
show us that they're here with us. And that is comforting. Whenever I'm going through something, it's interesting. I went to a restaurant today, and the woman said she contacted me after she knows my books, and she said, "Yeah, I went to clean off your table. Of course, I paid with a credit card, so there was no coins that I was dealing with." And she went to clean the table, and there was a dime underneath it. And to me, I'm like, that is just a sign that I'm in the right place. I'm doing the right things. Like, it's just kind of a little support system, like a cheerleading to me, to
Right.
know that they're still here and they can still show us that we're here.
You're not just an author, you're also, as we mentioned, you're a certified coach. Now, what other services are you able to provide for folks that might be interested in it?
Yeah, so my business is called Intuitive Wellness, I am a certified health and life coach. I was in public education for 32 years. I do a lot of research on brain, um, understanding the brain and neuro linguistic programming. Love to teach Reiki. So I do 3 levels of Reiki, level 1, level 2, and then a master's program. And in that, in Reiki, you start to understand about your energetic system. And also, especially in the master program, it's really individualized because of the health and life coaching and all of my credentials. I can really make it whatever that you want it to be. So, right now, I have some
Mm.
people who are studying and they're starting to hone in on their mediumship skills and they're starting to connect with the other side. And I can teach you how to do that. I also do, yeah, you can see I do angel card readings. I do emotional freedom techniques. I do past life work. I love to do dream analysis because our dreams are our soul trying to guide us. I just really like the soul work and that understanding yourself at a soul level. And so everything that I do is focused on that.
And you also have the staff wellness. How being in Vermont, how that seems to be something that people would kind of take advantage of as well.
Yeah, so we've had some. I actually have done this with partnered up with a friend of mine, Vicky Hill at Victoria uh, Physical Therapy in Hardwick, who I rent from her. My office is in her building, and the staff came in and we rotated through and they did different things, whether it was Reiki or card readings, different things. So it's all really to do with what the staff is needing for that time.
And so, as we say, if people want to learn more about the work and what you do, they could go to monicalmorrissey.com, correct?
And in the middle of my
Okay.
word, and in the middle of my name is the word calm. And I had somebody point
Oh,
that out.
that's all.
That I want to try to do something, graphic with that. I think that that would be really cool because I think
Yeah.
we're all looking for calmness right now, right? Like
Right.
amidst the world and everything that's going on, and we're searching for that. Whereas we used to be able to get it a little bit more easily, but now it just seems like we're all collectively feeling everything, and so I think that that's a it's a cool thing to focus in on and say, if you want calm in your life, come see me because I will help you understand your brain and why your brain is thinking the way that it is. And then I will also help you to be able to calm your body.
Huh. That's pretty cool. And that's completely serendipitous too.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't even notice it. I had to have somebody else point it out to me. Because, when I write my name, MonicaLMorrissey.com on my posters and stuff, she's like, look, there's calm in the middle of that. I was like, oh, perfect. I'm going to use that.
That's pretty cool. Okay. So listen, so good you say because you have your 3 books. You also, as you mentioned, you have notebooks and workbooks, and so you made those angel cards as well. Is that what you said?
Yeah, so those cards were written. I had one of my students pass away last year, and I sat down for a couple of weeks and I just wrote out what I would want somebody to know who doesn't understand everything that I understand about the other side and heaven
Mm,
and what it really is. Not necessarily what we're taught in religion. I think there's a difference between religion and spirituality. And so, anyway, I sat down and I wrote different cards that would help explain things more. So that's a card deck that's heaven's messages. So if you had somebody pass away, I
okay.
can do a card reading and I can help you, receive the messages from somebody, but you could also do it for yourself. And speaking of that, I actually have 2 angel card classes coming up. And so I have a couple of classes
Yeah.
coming up actually at September 20th at Deb's Place right down the street from you.
Yeah.
And so you could learn how to read cards And so you could purchase one of my decks, or you can bring your own deck. And I'm also doing it September 19th, and then the night before at the Hardwick Diner. So I'm doing a couple of card classes. I did them this past spring, and they were very well received. I teach you how to understand your intuition and really connect more to the other side and understand what that means. So that card deck was, written for that purpose, so that people could understand it more. Rather than having to read all my books and understand it, you can kind of get it from the cards.
And so nobody can buy these cards online then, right? You can't just.
So they used to be. They were on Amazon for a while. It's just, learning how to do all these things, right? You had to pay for storage, and it was costing me too much to store them. So now I have them, and so I have a bunch of copies at my office.
So people could order them through MonicaMorrissey.com then?
Yeah, you can send me a message. Yeah.
Okay.
But I was also going to tell you that if you're looking for all three of my books, I did put them into a trilogy. So it's Dimes from Heaven trilogy, and you can order them all three in one. If it's just the paperback, I'm not sure if it's on Kindle or not, but it's definitely a paperback if you want to get all three. If you're just starting to read, then that's the best deal.
But you also do audio. You've turned your books into audiobooks as well.
Yep, they're all three of them are on Audible. Yep.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Monica. I'm so excited that we're able to sit down and talk.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.